this is Mad Movie Mark with another Mad Movie Mark movie review. Continuing my trek across the Rotten Tomatoes landscape, I am trying to view and review all the movies that have a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This is, I believe, the fifth movie that I've reviewed, that I will be reviewing out of 206, and this is the 1925 Charlie Chaplin movie, The Gold Rush. So if we remember back to the review I did of The Kid, it was a glowing review. I gave it a 10 out of 10, said it was probably one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. I even flirted with the idea of us bumping one of my top 10 movies of all time and putting in The Kid. That's something I still have to grapple with because I have a definite love and affection for my top 10 movies of all time, but it's possible that I might do that. And then at the end of this, after I've reviewed and viewed every movie, or viewed and reviewed every movie, I will be coming out with the list, ranking the movies in order from my least favorite to favorite. So this movie is directed, written, and starring Charlie Chaplin. It has a 100% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 93% audience rating, which is pretty good. That's probably the upper echelon of what I've seen before. Usually they've been somewhere around 100% critic and somewhere in the mid to high 80s. So this has a raving review by both critics and audience, which means you can probably expect a really great movie coming your way. And they were both right. So it stars Charlie Chaplin as the lone prospector. He is in his tramp character in this movie. I'm not sure I've ever seen a movie where he's not acting as his tramp character. Maybe The Great Dictator, but I don't remember if he was his tramp character in that movie. But it also stars Max Swain as Big Jim McKay, Tom Murray as Black Larson, and Georgia Hale as Georgia. So Georgia plays Georgia. And this whole movie, Georgia is basically on the lone prospector's mind. Georgia is on his mind. So this movie was inspired by a picture, I believe, that Charlie Chaplin saw from the Gold Rush that was hitting California, and also inspired from the Donner Party, which is a famous party that kind of got lost in the snow and had to resort to some cannibalism when they were not able to find proper food. So this movie takes a lot from those two mediums, and this is about the Gold Rush. It's about the Gold Rush era. So we meet the lone prospector as he's climbing up this precarious mountain. He makes traversing this mountain seem very easy considering how difficult the terrain looks, which I thought was pretty comical because he's still doing his like tramp movement as he's traversing this really difficult mountain, which I thought was pretty funny. He runs into a bear, but he does not notice the bear because the bear is behind him. That'll come into play a little bit later, but so he's traversing a lot of difficult terrain that most people wouldn't be able to get through. He finds this log cabin that housed in it is Black Larson. We learned that Black Larson is wanted by the police because he has like a wanted poster of himself. At the same time, we also are introduced to Big Jim McKay, who has found himself a gold mine of enormous capacity. He is basically a millionaire if he was able to get this gold from his mine to the proper people where he can sell the gold. It is a blizzard, it is snowing. It is not the right conditions for him to try to do this. So he basically builds himself a little tent and tries to sleep through the storm while he's guarding his gold. A big snow kind of wind gust comes and blows him and his tent away, and he's blown to the same cabin where the lone prospector and Black Larson are. So we have all three of them in this cabin. Black Larson is not happy that there's two other people in his cabin where he lives, and he tries to get rid of them. There's this really funny scene where they keep opening a door and the wind keeps blowing them out the other side of the house through the other door, and they have to like try to fight the wind to get out of it, and then it blows them back, and each of them get a chance to kind of get the other one into this precarious position where they are getting blown by the wind and having to get back in the cabin. It's a pretty funny exchange. I thought it was very comical. So Big Jim McKay is kind of the bigger person in this movie. He definitely has height and weight advantage over everyone else, and he basically says that he's going to stay there and no one's going to stop him. And if you want to try to stop me, go ahead, but you're not going to be able to. So eventually, Black Larson has to give in and has to let these two people stay with him. As the days go on, they are unable to get any food because they're unable to go anywhere because of the big snow blizzard storm that's going on. So they agree that one of them will have to go and get help. And they are deciding who's going to get help. Eventually they come up with Black Larson's going to go off on his own to get help. So Black Larson goes off on his own to get help. And the other two are in the cabin. There's a scene, I think it's a pretty famous scene, where they're trying to find food and they can't find it. So the lone prospector ends up taking his boot off and boiling his boot on the stove, and they end up eating it. Now, I read further into what they were actually doing to see if they were really eating this boot, and apparently the boot is made entirely of licorice, and it was a special company back then that could make basically anything you would want out of licorice. And Charlie Chaplin ended up getting sick because he hates so much licorice trying to retake these different scenes. But anyway, it's pretty funny the way they do it. Charlie Chaplin is definitely a very good actor, and he is very good at kind of having a straight face type humor. So he's funny, but he never lets off that he thinks he's funny. He's just kind of stoic the whole time. So eventually the storm blows over and they have to go back to their camps, or they have to go off on their way. The Black Larson ends up finding another camp and he kills the two people there and takes their supplies. And as he's trying to get away from the scene, he ends up dying in an avalanche. So he never actually goes back to the other two like he says he will. He's just not a reliable person. He's in it for himself. But honestly, it probably would have been the same way with Big Jim McKay at this point in the movie. I'm assuming that he would have done the same thing. I think that the lone prospector, given that he's probably the more moral person in this movie, he might have gone back for them. But really, you had a pretty big chance that you were going to send out someone who wasn't going to be looking in your best interest. So before they go off on their own, there's this. No, okay, so they go off on their own, and the guy, the big guy, Big Jim McKay, ends up getting some sort of concussion, and he can't remember where he goes to the mine that he found, and he ends up getting a concussion, and he kind of wanders off, and he gets to this place where he's supposed to sell the gold, and he says, I have this big gold mine, I'm going to be a millionaire. And they say, well, where is this gold mine? And he says, oh, I can't remember. Sort of at the same time, the lone prospector has gone to this bar, this saloon, where he meets Georgia. He instantly kind of falls for her, love at first sight type of thing. She is with another guy, but she's trying to make the other guy jealous, so she dances with the lone prospector, which just makes his feelings even stronger. There is a picture that is taken of her while she's at the bar. The lone prospector ends up picking it up off the floor and keeping it. So he goes back to his cabin, and when he gets back there, the girls end up, this girl Georgia ends up just by happenstance coming to the cabin. The cabin, they said, is only a stone's throw away from, this is a new cabin. It's only a stone's throw away from this bar. So they end up wandering towards the cabin. They find the cabin, they enter it, and they see the lone prospector. Clearly the lone prospector still has a crush on this girl. The girls are just kind of laughing and giggling to themselves while the lone prospector and Georgia talk. The lone prospector excuses himself and goes outside, and while he's outside, Georgia lifts up his pillow and finds that picture that was on the floor of her. He now now has, also with like a little flower carnation also. So she realizes that maybe this guy has feelings for me, but they don't really make that clear in the movie if she's put two and two together yet. So the lone prospector comes back in and she throws this idea out that maybe we should hang out on New Year's Eve. I'll come down there at 8 o'clock p.m. and we can hang out. So he's obviously over the moon. The time comes for New Year's Eve. He has this feast that he has, in which they said he like begged, borrowed, and stole basically to get the money to have this feast. All the tables set up for the four women, and he falls asleep at the table. And of course, the women never come. They're at the bar partying, having a New Year's party, because her interest in him when she said that she would hang out with him on New Year's wasn't real. She's still into this guy that she was dating. It was just kind of an empty promise that she made that she didn't really remember about. But as they're having the party on New Year's Eve, the clock strikes midnight and she remembers the lone prospector, and she tells her boyfriend, hey, and all the girls, hey, maybe we should go down there and like have some fun with him and kind of like give him a hard time. So they make their way there, but at the same time, he decides he's going to go to the bar because he just woke up and, maybe she's going to be down there. So he goes to the bar. When the five of them get to his cabin, her boyfriend has a gun and he says, oh, I'm going to give him a real surprise. And he takes out his gun. And then when they get in there, she sees that the table is made up for like 4 people. She sees that their name cards are all on the table. So he was expecting them to come over for New Year's, and they didn't. You're still not really sure of her feelings here because her and her friends like start laughing again, and then she leaves and she goes back to the bar. So the lone prospector and her are at the bar, and then walks in Big Jim McKay. So he recognizes the lone prospector, and he recognizes that the lone prospector will remember where their old cabin was. And if he can find their old cabin, then he can kind of make his way back to his mind, which he forgot where it was. So he says, if you come with me to the old cabin, show me where it was, we can find my mind and we can both be millionaires. Now, while this is going on, Georgia had written a message to her boyfriend saying, I'm sorry for last night, because during New Year's Eve she got mad at him. I'm sorry for last night. I love you. Please understand. She passes it to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend reads it and thinks it would be really funny if he had someone pass it to the lone prospector. So the lone prospector gets it. He sees this note. He sees it signed Georgia, and he thinks that Georgia is in love with him. So as soon as he hears he's going to be a millionaire, he runs up to Georgia and he says, I'm going to make everything right. You're going to have the life you've always wanted. We're going to live together and be happy. And then she doesn't really know what he's talking about, I think, because she doesn't know that he had the note. So the next scene we see that him and the next scene we see Big Jim McKay and the lone prospector in the cabin. This time they have a lot of food and they have a lot of things that can help keep them alive. While they're sleeping, a big blizzard blows in and moves the cabin completely off of where it was and moves it to this cliff. And half the cabin's basically teetering on this cliff. And when they wake up, there's this very funny exchange where they are kind of realizing through trial and error that maybe they're in this precarious position where this cabin is teetering back and forth. They finally realize they are in this precarious position, and then they have to try to get themselves out of it because they are on the wrong end of the cabin, and they need to get to the correct end. Eventually they correct themselves, they get to where they need to be, they find the gold mine, and they become millionaires. So the next scene, we see them on a ship. They're dressed in suits. They decide that they're asked to take pictures to kind of tell the story of how these miners from nowhere became millionaires. They ask the lone prospector to get out of his suit and dress in his tramp clothing so they can do a rags to riches type of story and show him in rags. So he does this. While he's taking a picture, he ends up backing too far and he stumbles over this part of the ship onto the bottom of the ship. And by coincidence, Georgia is on the ship as well. I guess she is trying to get away from her boyfriend. Maybe this isn't the life that she originally wanted. So she's on the ship as well. They meet she thinks that maybe he was a stowaway on the ship because she heard that there was a stowaway. The cops from the ship come over and they try to see if something's wrong, and she says, "No, don't arrest him, please. I'll pay his fare. Like, he's a stowaway. Please don't arrest him." And they say, "A stowaway? He's a millionaire." And then she ends up kind of in this position where she doesn't say anything, but by her actions, you can tell that she's kind of ashamed of how she treated him. And now she's she's kind of at this point where, now she's not good enough for him because he's a millionaire and she really treated him badly. But he still loves her and he still wants to be with her. And at the end of the movie, they end up getting together. So like I said, when I reviewed The Kid, I gave it a perfect 10. This movie is also fantastic. I think that this is the only other Charlie Chaplin movie that has a perfect 100 fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And if that's true, that's really sad. I need to go back and look at the list that I have. But if that's true, I will also at some point go watch his other movies, because if his movies are like this and The Kid, then I don't understand how his movies aren't considered. I know his movies are considered among the greatest of all times, but The Gold Rush isn't mentioned in the same vein as like Citizen Kane. People who watch Citizen Kane, I'm assuming when they do film school, maybe they aren't also watching The Kid or Gold Rush, and maybe they should, because these are silent films that are the best of what they do. Now, I have never taken a film class, so I don't know if they actually do show these movies. But I do know if you go up to someone and you ask them, "Hey, do you know what Singing in the Rain is?" Or, "Hey, like, have you ever heard of the movie Top Hats?" Or even like, "Have you ever heard of The Grapes of Wrath, Philadelphia Story?" Movies that are pretty famous. A lot of them will say yes. You'll have a handful of people who have. But if you say, "Have you ever heard of The Kid or The Gold Rush?" many people won't know what you're talking about. And I think that is a huge stain and a huge detriment to society that people aren't watching these movies, because they are fantastic. I raved before about the piano playing in The Kid, and I wondered why I don't hear this in other movies. And it's the same in this movie. The piano playing is phenomenal. He's able to play fast when it needs be. It's a very loving playing methodically when there needs to be. It's just, I think the piano is the perfect instrument for these type of movies, because they really can set up a scene and they really can transition from scene to scene perfectly. I mean, don't get me wrong, I liked the woodwinds and the strings and the last laugh and the golem, but the piano just adds a whole different depth to me in these movies that I just can't really describe. They're so good. There's also a very funny scene. So back to the Donner Party, how this relates to the Donner Party. There's a really funny scene with Jim McKay later on in the movie where they are starving because they don't have any food, and he keeps thinking that the prospector is a chicken, and he's actually dressed like a chicken, someone like a chicken outfit, and it's hilarious. And he keeps going, like, hallucinating from thinking he's a chicken to not thinking he's a chicken, and it really adds to the comedic effect of this movie. And I'll also say that this movie, so besides The Kid, this movie does a great job of doing drama, comedy, and a love story at the same time. The Golem also had a love story in it, but the love story was kind of in the background. It's almost like they weren't able to concentrate on both stories at the same time. Maybe they didn't have the storytelling ability. I mean, I know the Golem is a folklore, but it's crazy because I've seen a few silent movies now, and none of them are able to blend all these different things together like this movie can. And it does a perfect job at telling the love story while having comedy, while also having drama. And it's a love story that you actually believe. And at the end, it's a love story where you actually feel that you're happy that these two people came together, and you're happy that he found the love that he wanted. And it's just, at the end, the ending is such a happy ending. This and The Kid were both happy endings, and you just feel like the movie came together as it should. There was no real throwaway scenes in this movie for me. Everything worked the way it should have. And I think that Charlie Chaplin is just a master at acting. He's a master at directing, definitely a master at music. I know he did the music for The Kid. I don't know if he did the music for this movie, but he has just a great brain when it comes to setting up a movie and just doing everything that is involved in this movie. what he brings to the movie is just unmatched. I don't know of anyone else who could do this. Now, I am going to be watching Steamboat Bill Jr., and that actor in that movie as well also directs, and he's also considered Buster Keaton, one of the greats of his time as well. So I'll get to him when I get to him, but it's going to be really hard for him to match what Charlie Chaplin, I think, does. And also, the actors around him were good too. Big Jim McKay, when he's hallucinating, when he has his loss of memory, he's very believable. When Black Larson is killing people and being nefarious, he's also very good. Charlie Chaplin has this way of surrounding himself by character actors who do a really good job, and they do a really good job of what they need to do, these character actors. And I think that they, together as an ensemble, do very good in this movie. Also, the special effects he does, where he's having the house teeter on the side of a cliff. I mean, they didn't have special effects back then that would allow you to just create that on a computer. You had to do all this stuff in like a sound stage. And for him to be able to create that scene, I think is absolutely amazing. I watch it and I don't know how he was able to do that as well as he did and make it believable. So I think not only is he a master at acting, which I think everyone knows that he's a great actor and considered one of the greatest actors of all times, but I honestly, before I came into this, didn't realize he was a director of almost all of his movies and that he was as good as a director as he is. And to me, that is just adds to his fame and adds to his persona. And I think that he's terrific. So this is another home run for me. I've seen three of his movies. I can only remember this one and the Kid. I don't remember how I felt about The Great Dictator, so I'll have to watch it again. But both home runs, complete home runs. For me, this one was funny and it had everything that I wanted to have. It didn't have, though, the relationship and everything. It just didn't have that certain feeling to it that the Kid had. So I'm going to give it a 9.5 instead of a 10, but I think a 9.5 is still a really good movie considering the only other movie that's come close is his movie that I gave a 10 on. So this is a 9.5. I think that everyone should watch it if you have a chance. This movie, he said he wanted to be the movie that he was remembered for the most. So I think everyone should go out and watch it and remember him. Thank you. I will be back with my next review, which is going to be Steamboat Bill Jr., which is Buster Keaton, who is considered one of the three kind of pillars of the silent era. One of the other ones was Charlie Chaplin. Steamboat Bill is the other one. I honestly don't know who the third one is. I'd have to look it up. But I will be back to review that. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.